Hello students, welcome to BBA 204 Principles of Management. In today's lecture, I will talk about managing diversity in organizations of all kinds. After studying this chapter, we should be able to understand the demographic changes in the domestic and global marketplace and how corporations are responding. In addition to training programs that can promote knowledge and acceptance of diverse cultures, we will also talk about how to educate managers on valuing the differences. Nowadays, organizations recognize that everyone is not the same and that the differences people bring to the workplace are valuable. Diversity is often defined as all the ways in which employees differ. Many companies once defined diversity in terms of race, age, gender, lifestyle, and disability. However, in today's work environment, companies are embracing a more inclusive definition of diversity that recognizes a spectrum of differences that influence how employees approach work, interact with each other, derive satisfaction from their work, and define who they are as people in the workplace. So here there is figure 13.3, which is all talking about projected changes in US labor force from 2010 to 2020. Managing diversity, a key management skill in today's global economy, means creating a climate in which the potential advantages of diversity for organizational or group performance are maximized, while the potential disadvantages are minimized. Here is the diversity on a global scale. It is imperative to understand local cultures. Europe is very different from the United States because it has very complex social and cultural systems. Diversity challenges concerning progression of women into upper management positions are still a problem for our society, and we will talk about what these diversity challenges facing women shortly. Now let's look at the definition of diversity. Today, diversity is defined broadly in terms of race, gender, age, lifestyle, disability. However, there is a more detailed definition of diversity that says that diversity is defined as all the ways in which employees differ. Many companies once defined diversity in terms of race, age, gender, lifestyle, and disability. However, today, companies are embracing a more inclusive definition of diversity that recognizes a spectrum of differences that include how employees approach work, interact with each other, derive satisfaction from their work, and define who they are as people in the workplace. So we're just talking about here very inclusive model of diversity that includes all the ways in which people are different, even including spiritual beliefs. Here in figure 13.4, we see the differences between traditional versus inclusive models of diversity. The table compares traditional model of diversity to the more inclusive model of diversity, which includes all the ways in which employees are different, even including, as I said, work style, military experience, nationality, personality, spiritual beliefs, and so forth and so on. Now, let's look at some of the factors that shape the personal bias in the workplace. And there are three factors that shape our bias or the way we look at people in the workplace. One of them is prejudice, the other one is discrimination, and the third one is stereotypes. Let's now focus on the definition of prejudice. Prejudice is the tendency to view people who are different as being deficient or less valued. So discrimination occurs when people act out their prejudicial attitudes toward other people who are targets of their prejudice. In other words, discrimination is an act which uses prejudicial attitudes. So when we're discriminating against other people, it means that we already have prejudice against those people, or we have stereotypes about those people. Although blatant discrimination is not as widespread as in the past, bias in the workplace often shows up in subtle ways. Now let's look at stereotypes. Stereotype is a rigid, exaggerated, irrational belief associated with a particular group of people. Most often, racism includes not only discrimination or discriminating against a particular group, ethnic group, or racial group, but also racism is all about prejudice and stereotyping about other people. Again, a stereotype is a rigid, exaggerated, irrational belief associated with a particular group of people. To be successful managing diversity, managers need to eliminate harmful stereotypes from their thinking, shedding any biases that negatively affect the workplace. As effective and functional and efficient managers, we should rise above prejudice, discrimination, and stereotypes. Stereotype threat describes the psychological experience of a person who, usually engaged in a task, is aware of a stereotype about his or her identity group, suggesting that he or she will not perform well on that task. Certain groups in society are more subject to prejudice, discrimination, and stereotypes than other groups in society. The groups who have the most power in society can be prejudiced against the people who do not have the power. People most affected by stereotype threat are those we consider as disadvantaged in the workplace due to negative stereotypes. These people are most often racial and ethnic minorities, members of lower socioeconomic classes, women, older people, gay and bisexual men, and people with disabilities. Don't forget, the people who are most affected by stereotype, prejudice, and discrimination in the workplace are these group of people which are racial and ethnic minorities, members of lower socioeconomic classes, women, older people, gay and bisexual men, and people with disabilities. Here is in table 13.6. We're talking about stereotyping versus valuing cultural differences. Please carefully review this table. Another factor that we need to talk about is ethnocentrism, because ethnocentrism is a very common problem in the workplace. Ethnocentrism is the belief that one's own group and subculture are inherently superior to other groups and cultures, thus making it difficult to value diversity. In other words, racism, being biased, stereotype against other groups in society, racism is a form of ethnocentrism. Ethnocentrism, because someone who is racist also believes that its own group and subculture are superior to other groups and cultures. The business world, however, tends to reflect values, behaviors, and assumptions based on the experiences of a homogeneous, white, middle-class, male workforce. Most management theories presume workers share similar values, beliefs, motivations, and attitudes about work and life in general. However, nowadays, organizations are shifting from a monoculture view to pluralism and even ethno-relativism. In this lecture, we also recognize the factors that affect women's opportunities, including the glass ceiling, the opt-out trend, and the female advantage. Now, let's look at some of the factors affecting women's careers in the workplace. One of the most important barrier or obstacle to women's successful careers in the workplace is the glass ceiling problem. The glass ceiling is an invisible barrier that separates women and minorities from top management positions. They can look up through the ceiling and see top management, but prevailing attitudes and stereotypes are invisible obstacles to their own advancement. Women and minorities are often excluded from informal manager networks, and they don't get access to the type of general and line management experience required for moving to the top. Glass walls serve as invisible barriers to mobility within the organization. Many women choose to get off the fast track long before they hit the glass ceiling. For example, there is another trend which is a serious obstacle to women's career choices in the workplace, and this trend is known as opt-out trend. In this opt-out trend, highly educated, professional women are deciding that corporate success isn't worth the price in terms of reduced family and personal time. So we see a reverse trend that's happening in the workplace. A lot of successful women who are graduates, who have very valuable degrees, they come back home. They leave their jobs and come back home because they think that corporate success is not worth the price in terms of reduced family and personal time. So we're saying that some women are opting out to be stay-at-home moms, while others want to continue working, but just not in the kind of fast-paced, competitive, aggressive environment that exists in most corporations. So women deciding to leave work and deciding to stay at home moms is known as the opt-out trend, because in this case There is no force or pressure of women. Women are voluntarily leaving the workforce for various reasons. Critics, however, argue that this is just another way to blame women themselves for the dearth of female managers at higher levels. Another aspect that this lecture focuses on is the female advantage. What is the female advantage in the workplace? Some people think women might actually be better managers, partly because of a more collaborative, less hierarchical, relationship-oriented approach that is in tune with today's global and multicultural environment. As attitudes and values change with changing generations, the qualities women seem to possess may lead to a gradual role reversal in organizations. Women of all races and ethnic groups are outpacing men in earning bachelor's and master's degrees. Overall, women's participation in both the labor force and civic affairs has steadily increased since the mid-1950s, while men's participation has slowly but steadily declined. Now let's look at a successful diversity plan. A successful diversity plan leads to a workforce that demonstrates cultural competence in the long run. Because organizations of all kinds must reduce obstacles for disadvantaged employees. Cultural competence is the ability to interact effectively with people of different cultures. Again, cultural competence is the ability to interact effectively with people of different cultures. This figure, 13.7, summarizes 5 steps to implementing a diversity plan. How should managers implement a diversity plan? First, we should uncover diversity problems in the organization. We should hire a cultural audit. A cultural audit is a tool that identifies problems or areas needing improvement in a corporation's culture. We should also strengthen top management commitment to diversity, leadership, and support. Also, we should choose solutions to fit a balanced strategy. To be most effective, solutions should be presented in a balanced strategy and address 3 major factors: education, enforcement, and exposure. And every manager should also demand results and revisit the goals. Diversity performance should be measured by numerical goals to ensure solutions are being implemented successfully. Diversity plans should also maintain momentum to change the culture. Diversity initiatives and training programs help create a climate that values diversity. They improve morale, they decrease interpersonal conflict, they facilitate progress in new markets, and they increase creativity. Here are the most common diversity initiatives. As you know, the most popular and the common one used by managers is the diversity-focused recruiting, as opposed to training and education and community outreach, which are all equally important. Leading companies are changing structures and policies to facilitate and support diversity. Most large organizations have formal policies as well as structured grievance procedures and complaint review processes. Companies are also developing policies to support the recruitment and career advancement of diverse employees. A new approach to recruitment means making better use of recruiting strategies, offering internship programs to give people opportunities, and developing creative ways to draw on previously unused labor markets. One of the most successful structures for eliminating the glass ceiling is the mentoring relationship. Mentoring relationship has been found very effective to promote diversity in the workplace. Mentoring relationship is indeed one of the most important programs in place to support diversity. Mentoring provides minorities and women with direct training and inside information on the norms and expectations of the organizations. Many top managers are often unaware of the special needs of employees who are single parents, are non-English speaking, or have elderly parents. For instance, alternative work scheduling may be important for these groups of workers. Another issue is that racial and ethnic minorities and immigrants have had fewer educational opportunities than other groups, such as white, male, upper class, social classes in society. Some companies work with high schools to provide fundamental skills in literacy and math, and to provide programs within the company to upgrade employees to appropriate educational levels. Another important initiative and program to promote diversity in the workplace is to make up multicultural teams. Multicultural teams are as important as mentoring relationships. Multicultural teams are made up of members from diverse national, racial, ethnic, and cultural backgrounds. Multicultural teams even provide greater potential for enhanced creativity, innovation, and value in the workplace. A team with different perspectives, backgrounds, and cultural values creates a healthy mix of ideas, which sometimes encourages more reluctant people to speak out. Diversity can stimulate a healthy level of conflict that leads to greater creativity and better decisions. But the problem is that multicultural teams are more difficult to manage because of the increased potential for miscommunication and misunderstanding among the members of group. So as much as we should use multicultural teams to promote diversity and understanding among people from different cultural backgrounds, we should also remember that multicultural teams are not easy to manage. There is always increased or greater potential for miscommunication and misunderstanding due to differences among members of the multicultural team. Another aspect of the diversity initiative programs is the employee affinity groups. Employee affinity groups are based on social identity, such as gender, race, and these groups are organized by employees to focus on concerns of employees from that group. The idea behind affinity groups is that minority employees can join together across traditional organizational boundaries for mutual support and to extend member influence in the organization. An important characteristic of affinity groups is that employees, not the organization, form them, and membership is always voluntary. There has been a rapid growth of employee network groups for minorities who have faced barriers to advancement in organizations. Thank you for listening to my lecture so far. In this lecture, we talk about managing diversity in organizations as well as the most effective use of diversity initiatives and programs. In my next lecture, I will talk about Chapter 19, which is about performance measurement or how to measure performance in organizations. Thank you for listening to my lecture so far and have a good day.